With us now, Executive Vice President and General Manager Nick Caserio. Nick, great to see you.
Fellas, good to be here.
I know a tough loss against Minnesota, but a big week with Jacksonville coming up right back into the division. What's it going to take to bounce back for the team? I know everybody's getting through it.
Yeah, this is a week-to-week endeavor in this league. That's what this is about. So what we have to do is just focus on this week. Can't really change what happened against Minnesota. We didn't play our best football. Another opportunity for us here this week. Jacksonville in the division, coming into our place. They came in here last year and beat us there late in the year. So good football team. Didn't play that well the other night, but, I mean, the league is about just flipping a page and moving on to the next opportunity. So we have a lot of experience against this team and against his coaching staff in some respects. We'll talk about that a little bit later here. But you just got to play better football and just be consistent and do the things that are conducive to winning.
Nick, I think along those lines, I always think about this. Well, you turn a page and you go on to next week. But easier said than done. What's kind of the biggest thing that goes into, all right, let's turn the page? Is it watching a film, being done with it, moving on, not elaborating on things? How do you kind of go about turning the page to get to next week?
Yeah, it's really just going through your process. It's probably not as hard as people think it is. So regardless of what happens in the game that particular day, you're either going to be excited for what happened or you're going to be a little bit distraught that you didn't play well and didn't go your way. So that's the way this league is. You're probably going to lose by and large. Everybody's going to probably lose 5, 6, 7 games at some point. I mean, look at the records last year. So just figure out what you didn't do well. Is it correctable? Is it fixable? Are there things that we can implement to try to improve those things? Then you have to look at the opponent and focus on what they do well, the challenges that they provide on each side of the ball, and be prepared for those, because that's what the main focus is for that particular week.
One thing that stands out to me is how much you fight all year long for the fine line moments to occur, and they didn't in that game. Tip ball doesn't go your way, holding penalty, kickoff out of bounds, near pick doesn't happen, those kinds of things.
It's the way it goes. Sometimes the ball bounces a certain way. So, I mean, just the first drive on both sides of the ball was really the harbinger of things to come over the course of the game. So, first play of the game, you get a penalty. Second play of the game, you get a tip pass, and they have the ball in a short field. Can't get a stop on third down. Scramble play, it's 7-0, missed field goal. They go out and score, it's 14-0 before you have a cup of coffee. So just the way it goes sometimes. But you just have to play the next play, just kind of keep moving, and then put yourself in a position. And in the end, we just couldn't make enough plays that were conducive to winning.
Nick, with a team like the Vikings, you see them every 4 years. Obviously, they had a few guys that we do remember and have been here, so we do them. But now you face the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't think the process is any different, but the fact that it is a division team that you know so intimately well maybe doesn't change the preparation, but does it help in a sense that you know Josh Hines-Allen, you know Trayvon Walker, you know the players, Trevor Lawrence on the other side?
Yeah, you're familiar probably from a personnel standpoint with their strengths and weaknesses. What you have to do is figure out how are they deploying those players for that particular season. The defensive side of the ball have a new coordinator. They've made some modifications and changes, so still have the same player, the things that he does well. How are they using him within that scheme? And the same thing offensively. They've acquired some new players. How are they going to incorporate them into the offense? They have some holdovers, some carryovers. So it's more from a personnel familiarity standpoint. You know who the players are, understand who the new players are, then just figure out how they're being utilized within the scheme for this season.
Yeah. Big topic this week about the penalties that occurred in the Minnesota game and cleaning that up. We talked to Coach about it a little bit. What does that take when you look at false starts, when you look at some of the lining up difficulties?
Yeah, it just takes a little focus and discipline and just correcting things that are controllable. So, the last 2 games, and we've had, 22, 23 penalties, whatever it is. It just puts you in positions where you're trying to make up lost yardage. So try to mitigate those, try to eliminate them as best you can, but it just takes some focus, discipline, purpose, and just go out there and do your job the right way.
All right, I really don't want to talk about Minnesota anymore. I don't want to talk about, we got to fix penalties. Okay, we'll do that this week. Let's do all that. But let's talk about this Jacksonville Jaguars team. We saw them on Monday night. Did not have a great night against the Buffalo Bills. But last time we saw them, they beat us in this building. Trevor looked really good against us, and they went home with a 24-21 win. How do we avoid that, Nick? What do you see with the Jaguars? What's the scouting report?
Yeah, sure. In some respects, that game wasn't too dissimilar to the Minnesota game. We were down 10-0 early in the game, and then we were kind of playing catch-up. But pretty well-established program. Doug and Trent have put together a good team. When you look at their team, I'd say it's a big, long, physical team, and they have some explosive players on both sides of the ball. Really, where the most changes have taken place is defensively. Hired Ryan Nielsen, who was a coordinator in Atlanta, who we saw last year as a part of their staff, and they played us pretty tough there defensively last year. So between Nielsen and Chris Richard, who they worked together in New Orleans, so there's some continuity amongst the defensive staff. But everything starts with the front. They talked about it. You watch them play, and that's where it starts. I mean, 2 bookends on the edge. I think combined they had 27 and change sacks last year. So really productive players. Hines Allen is as good of an edge rusher as in the league, and he's skilled, and he plays with a very high motor. So him and Walker on the edges. And then inside, you have a bunch of big bodies in there. They signed Armstead after he was released there by San Francisco. Trent actually was involved in drafting him back in San Francisco. Yep. So, and Robertson Harris, who's big, long. Hamilton, he was in and out last year. So, big, strong front. The 2 linebackers are as productive as any 2 in the league. Olakon led the league in tackles, or was among the league leaders in tackles. Tough, fast, instinctive. And Lloyd is just continually to get better over the course of the season. Where they really had the most changes in the secondary. When you look at their secondary, who we played against last year, like a lot of those guys aren't even here. Really, the main holdover is Cisco, right? So Cisco comes back, good young player. Signed Savage in free agency, was in Green Bay, is really playing a nickel. Antonio Johnson, a Texas A&M kid, kind of was a third safety. He's kind of moved into the starting safety role. Now, Campbell got hurt there a week or 2 ago, but really good corner. So between Monteric Brown and then Darby. So Darby was in Baltimore last year. Signed Darby in free agency. They've had some other injuries take place here. We'll see kind of how they came out the game last night. But defensively, they're big, they're long, they're explosive, and they put a lot of stress on you at the front. And offensively, the skill group for the most part is intact. Trevor signed the extension in the offseason. A key part of their offense, who hadn't played the last couple of games, is Ingram. So if he plays, he's obviously going to be a focal point. Right. I mean, he had almost 100 catches last year. Was a highly targeted player. You know, 2 good backs, Etienne and Bigsby. Etienne's a very versatile back. Made a couple changes on the offensive line. Signed Morrison for agency, who's in Buffalo, who's in Kansas City prior to that. Ezra Cleveland, who they actually traded for midseason last year, is kind of a backup rotational player, inserted him into the lineup. So good offensive line. Signed Duvernay to give him some flexibility as a returner, offensive player, good with the ball in his hand. Drafted Brian Thomas, who's big and fast and explosive from LSU. And they added Gabe Davis, who's been a consistently productive player. So they're a talented team. So their record is what their record is. Our expectation is that they're going to come in here and be ready to play. They have a good coaching staff, well coached in the kicking game as well, Heath Farwell. So we understand the challenges that are in front of us. We just have to do a good job with our preparation here this week, getting ready to play against a good Jacksonville team.
With Trevor, I know it's not going as well as they wanted to right now, but we've seen him at his best, and that's the Trevor you have to prepare for, right?
Yeah, he's an accurate thrower. He's big, and he can create plays with the legs. I want to say against Cleveland, the longest run they had in the game was a scramble, red area scramble that he had, 25, 30 yards to put him in a scoring position. So big, strong guy, has a lot of experience in the system, worked with coach, with Doug and Press now for a number of years. So when he gets on and gets going there, he can get on rhythm and present some problems and complete a lot of passes. And I think the big thing is just kind of keeping the ball in front of us, not letting them create the big plays, which they want to do offensively.
How much do you sense they miss Ingram this last couple of weeks, Nick?
I mean, he's a highly targeted player, John. I want to say he was their most targeted player last year. So between Ingram and then didn't mention Kirk, but Kirk didn't play last year, was hurt last year a little bit at the end. But those 2 players on the inside part of the formation put a lot of stress. I want to say Kirk might have been their leading receiver there last night against Buffalo. When Ingram's on the field, you just have to be cognizant of him. He's a very good catch-and-run player. So once he gets a ball in his hands, you're going to have to tackle him. So he's athletic and he's fast. So we have to account for him that when he's on the field.
So this is a simple question, but it always gets discussed maybe places outside the building. Oh, this team lost last week, so they'll be really mad this week and play that much better or harder or whatever. Is there anything to that? What do you think of that kind of thought pattern?
Yeah, I think every team goes through whatever happens on Sunday. You got to figure out what do we have to do that week to put ourselves in the best position to have an opportunity to win and just make sure the game doesn't get away from you early. It happens every week. One team wins, then the next week they lose, and everybody's scratching their heads about what happened. Well, in the end, it's about execution, and who plays the best that day, that's the team that's ultimately going to win. So that's what your focus is as a team. That's where the focus is as a staff, and that's where you just have to make sure you don't lose sight of that and not worry about what's going on outside.
I'm always hyper-focused on preparation. I always think it's really interesting how teams go about doing different things. With a player like Ingram, and you were talking about Ingram, it made me think about him, because he can flex out. He can do some different things. And I know that, you try and match up with personnel. Do you have to treat Ingram like a receiver at times, depending on where he's lined up? Do you treat him as a receiver? Like Kelsey, with Kelsey, you treat him sometimes like a receiver, sometimes not. How do you kind of go about it, looking at it, well, this is really 10 personnel because Ingram's more receiver in this set versus well, this is another set where it might be 11 personnel. Does that kind of go into the thought process against a guy like Ingram?
Yeah, ultimately, you just have to be assignment sound. And what's your philosophy defensively? How do you want to handle it? So sometimes it's a cat and mouse game. If the offense does this, the defense is going to do this. Right. Some defenses just say, well, this is how we're going to play regardless of who's on the field. So it goes back to just understanding the players, having an awareness of what they're being asked to do. And teams are going to build a formation a certain way. They're going to be either on the line of scrimmage, maybe detached. They might be flexed out. So some of this is where are they going to be aligned, how are you going to treat them, but you don't want to overthink it as well. So understand the formation, understand what they do out of those formations, understand what each player is capable of doing, and keep the focus there.
Yeah. We're only in week 4, Nick, but coming off the draft, you drafted who you drafted. You're evaluating them all the time. What about all the guys you didn't draft who you looked at and said, well, we had this kind of grade on this guy. How are they doing right now through 3-4 weeks? Do you do that sort of thing as a staff?
Yeah, no question, Mark. We actually sort of just keep track of the rookies during the course of the year. Mm-hmm. Not so much, well, we liked them, we didn't like them. It's just, all right, where were they picked? Who's playing? What's their role? Maybe the circumstances dictate they're not playing. Are they inactive? But we try to track that because once they come into the league, we're always going to go back and evaluate, well, we had a player graded a certain way. How is he being used? Maybe he's a little bit better. Maybe he's a little bit worse. Every system is going to be a little bit different, but we actually do run a rookie report in the first couple weeks. Try not to put too much emphasis on it, but you start to see some patterns declare once you get to about week 6, 7, or 8, kind of who's playing, who's not. I would say I know he didn't play last week, but Ivan Pace was a good example of a player that during the course of the year he was playing, he was productive, and I think he was like the leading tackler amongst linebackers last year or second. So, well, okay, that's interesting. So there's another player that wasn't drafted. Then you go back and kind of look at some things. So you're always looking for ways to kind of improve your process with the information that you have, and that's part of our responsibilities to use that information and study it.
You got, I don't know what week it actually is, but I know the trade deadline comes up a lot sooner than seemingly.
I think it's week 9 or maybe after Halloween.
But it seems like it's coming up a whole lot faster than you think. Like, man, we're already week 4. It feels like we just started this thing. So in preparation of that, not saying that you will or you won't, but is there any point where you kind of like, all right, trade deadline, we got to start thinking about what other teams might do, or is that just always 24/7, 365 thought for you, Nick?
Yeah, you're always just looking at what's going on in the league, looking at different teams, studying the opponent, in this case Jacksonville, and next week we're looking at Buffalo, who's playing, who's not playing, where are they, void of something, or where is there maybe a surplus. So it's something that we continually talk about week to week. So it's not you wait till the trade deadline and then the trade and all of a sudden go, well, okay, well, let's trade for somebody. So if there's a purpose and a rationale behind doing something, great. I've been a part of situations where, we've done trades at the deadline. We haven't done trades at the deadline. We did a trade one year. We were actually playing Monday night. We traded for a player. The trade deadline was the next day. We ended up trading for the player. So it's pretty fluid. You just have to make sure you have the information, understand the information, what are your options, and just try to make a good decision and don't do something just because you feel like you have to do it.
Yep. So back to the division. I know you said Jacksonville's a bit different, of course, but they have some similarities, no doubt. And I'm always interested in the thought that you have on division opponents and the evaluation of such, because we talk about teams tend to sign players that were in their division because you see so much of them on tape against your opponents and that kind of thing.
Well, you're going to see those players twice a year, so it's an opportunity to evaluate them. Honestly, you're probably going to evaluate them over the course of the entire season. So let's say you play a team early in the year, then you see them later in the year, well, you're going to go back, and the players that are who are free agents at the end of the year, who are the unrestricted free agents, and B, maybe there's some players cap-wise or salary-wise, there's going to be a mismatch. So it's just part of our job is to understand the team, understand the personnel. If there's an opportunity after the season that you think makes sense, great. If there's not, then you move on to the next option. So, but when you're going to see, look, we play these teams twice a year. Okay, there's 6 games against how many players? A couple hundred players there. So that's our job. That's what we're supposed to do. So understand the team, understand the opponent, and then just use the information and try to make good decisions.
In particular, one player for the Jaguars, Nick, and quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. What have you seen in Trevor? We saw him first in 2021. We've seen him all the way through. We've kind of seen him kind of ride the roller coaster as it is. What have you seen in Trevor, and what makes him difficult? Because we've seen 3 quarterbacks that, and maybe it's every quarterback we're going to face this year, all of them can move. If you give them a gap and a seam in the rush, they're going to exploit it. Sam did that. They can all do that. We know Trevor can do that as well. But what have you seen as the main aspects of Trevor's growth in the league in the 4 years we've seen him?
I think it's just understanding what's going on the other side of the ball, more comfortable with his offense. There's been some change. He's been through some ups and downs, which I would say every player goes through, and he's gotten stronger. And again, to your point, John, he's more athletic than you probably think he is. So he's been very strategic about using his legs to keep some plays alive. So he's a big, strong guy. He's athletic. He's capable of getting the ball, to his skilled players. And they've designed the offense kind of around him to try to take advantage of what he does well. So, I mean, that's what it is each week. I think that's what each team tries to do with their quarterback, and the Jaguars are no different.
All right, Nick, it's International Day presented by Kroger, and I wanted to get a feel for any international trips you've taken that are memorable to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, been a part of a couple trips to London when we played, and then I would say probably the best trip that I've had is probably our honeymoon. So my wife and I got married, so we went to Greece. We started in Athens for 3-4 days, and then we spent another 4 or 5 days in Santorini, and it was just as great of an experience as I've been a part of. So it's just so serene. The food was really good. We had octopus. We enjoyed different foods, but the way they prepare the octopus. So anytime we go eat somewhere, we're always looking for octopus. And, anytime you get married, hopefully it's a good memory. And I would say that trip absolutely was an awesome trip.
Okay. Did you let your hair down and have some baklava, or is that just out of the Caserio diet?
I did not work that in. Sorry to disappoint everybody.
Well, everybody will be happy to be back in the building, right? And last time the Texans were at NRG Stadium, great atmosphere, Sunday Night Football, Chicago. Now it's a noon kick. AFC South. We're back to the meat and potatoes of it all, but home field is so important for this squad's chances.
It's always good just to be home. You're kind of, what your routine entails. So the crowd was great. The other night there, the last home game against Chicago, the roof will be closed. So because it'd probably be a little bit warmer
Breaking
out there.
news.
More than likely. Yeah. But it's always good to be at home, and this is a get up and go game. So everybody, players included, fans included, get up, get your coffee, get ready to go, and come in here and hopefully they have an impact on a game. So looking forward to being back.
Absolutely. Nick, thanks a lot for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, fellas.